For nearly 4 decades, Tom Silva was the man Americans trusted without question. Calm hands, measured words, a presence that never wavered, even when houses collapsed or projects went wrong. But recently, something changed. The steadiness faded, the silence grew heavier, and for the first time, Tom Silva stopped pretending everything was fine. Before the cameras ever found him. Long before television turned Tom Silva into a familiar face, his life was already shaped by responsibility, pressure, and an understanding of danger that most children never encounter. He was born in January in Lexington, Massachusetts, into a family where working with your hands was not a hobby, but a necessity. His father built for a living. His older brother handled tools before Tom could even name them. In that house, nobody waited for adulthood to begin learning. You either helped or you were in the way. By the time Tom was 8 years old, he was mixing mortar. By 10, he was framing small structures, learning by trial and error and collecting scars he would carry for the rest of his life. The Silvas lived in a colonial home built in the late 18th century, a place that quietly taught Tom 2 lessons at once: that craftsmanship mattered and that history deserved respect. Every creaking floorboard and aging beam felt alive, and Tom absorbed that without realizing it was shaping his future philosophy. Then fear entered the house. During the height of Cold War anxiety, when news headlines spoke openly about nuclear threats, the Silva family made a decision that would permanently alter Tom's relationship with construction. They began digging beneath their home, not a small trench, not a casual experiment, a full underground fallout shelter carved by hand beneath their own foundation. No heavy machinery, no shortcuts, just shovels, exhaustion, and the belief that getting it right might one day mean survival. For nearly 2 years, Tom helped haul rocks, frame walls in freezing darkness, and shoulder responsibilities far beyond his age. Down there, beneath layers of earth and fear, something settled into him. Construction stopped being about buildings. It became about protection, about dignity, about making spaces that could hold people together when everything else failed. That belief followed him into adulthood. When Tom graduated in the mid-1960s, he walked away from the academic path many expected him to take and returned directly to the work that had raised him. By 19, he and his brother Dick scraped together a pickup truck, borrowed tools, and began taking whatever jobs they could find: attics, repairs, small remodels, nothing glamorous. But every mistake came with consequences. One early job nearly killed him when a roof collapsed without warning. Another dragged the brothers into a brutal dispute over a faulty foundation, a conflict so severe they were forced to mortgage their own home just to survive it. Instead of hiding behind lawyers, Tom returned to the site night after night for months, rebuilding the entire structure himself until even the angriest client had no choice but to recognize the integrity in front of them. That quiet reputation spread. Homeowners began whispering about a contractor who refused to walk away from his mistakes, a man who would lose sleep before he lost trust. What no one realized was that Tom was already internalizing a dangerous rule for himself. Every failure was his burden to carry alone, and that rule would one day push him far beyond ordinary construction work. When television found a man who never asked for it, fame didn't arrive in Tom Silva's life through ambition or strategy. It walked onto his job site one ordinary afternoon in the mid-1980s, wearing work boots and carrying a camera. The man behind it was Russ Marash, a longtime neighbor who had grown up watching Tom work, quietly aware that there was something different about the way he approached construction. Tom didn't perform. He didn't sell himself. He simply worked, with a kind of calm that felt almost stubborn. When Russ first suggested television, Tom declined. He was busy. He had deadlines. Clients depended on him. The idea of cameras hovering over a construction site felt unnecessary, maybe even intrusive, but Russ didn't let it go. He brought a small crew to one of Tom's job sites and asked him to walk through a problem on the spot. No script, no retakes, just work. Tom didn't change his behavior. He explained the issue slowly, clearly, using language homeowners could understand without talking down to them. He showed how mistakes happened, why shortcuts failed, and how patience mattered more than speed. The cameras kept rolling and something unexpected happened. Tom forgot they were there. That moment became the beginning of his long association with Ask This Old House and its parent program. From the very first appearances, viewers sensed it. This wasn't a host chasing attention. This was a craftsman letting people watch him think. And that distinction mattered. While other television builders leaned into spectacle, Tom resisted it. When producers suggested faster methods or modern shortcuts to keep projects moving, he pushed back. He insisted on hand-nailing boards where machines would have been quicker. He slowed shoots when something didn't feel right. Not to be difficult, but because the work demanded it. His loyalty wasn't to the camera. It was to the structure standing in front of him. That loyalty earned trust, but it also earned tension. Production schedules tightened, expectations grew, and the physical demands never eased. During one shoot toward the end of the decade, a scaffold failed beneath him. As it gave way, Tom shoved a cameraman out of harm's path and took the fall himself, fracturing his wrist. Filming stopped briefly. Tom returned days later with his arm braced, refusing to let the project stall. To viewers, he became a teacher. To the crew, he became something else entirely. The man who would absorb risk before letting it touch someone else. What nobody saw was the pattern forming. Each time something went wrong, Tom took responsibility. Each time pressure increased, he absorbed it quietly. Television amplified his reputation, but it also locked him into a role he never questioned. The steady one. The unbreakable one. The man who never showed strain. And that image followed him everywhere. When fire stopped being a television lesson. Until the end of the 1990s, disaster was something Tom Silva explained to other people. A collapsed beam, a failed foundation, a cautionary example turned into a teachable moment. But in the spring of 1999, fire stopped being a subject for discussion and became something that tore straight through his own family. The house belonged to his brother, Dick, a place filled with decades of ordinary life, tools collected over time, children's toys, rooms shaped by habit and memory. The fire didn't announce itself dramatically. It smoldered quietly before anyone noticed, feeding on the structure from the inside. By the time emergency crews arrived, the damage was irreversible. Windows shattered from heat. Sections of the roof disappeared. Floors collapsed into each other. What remained looked less like a home and more like the aftermath of a violent erasure. Tom arrived to find ash where laughter had been, charred objects that once mattered, the smell of burned timber that never quite leaves your clothes. Cameras would later record pieces of the rebuilding process, but what they never captured was the moment Tom stood inside that ruined frame and realized the rules had changed. This wasn't a project. This was family. Insurance adjusters, inspectors, and contractors could have taken over. Tom could have stepped back, taken the role of supportive brother, and let professionals handle the work. Instead, he put his boots on and went to work himself. Not because he needed control, but because walking away wasn't an option he knew how to choose. Board by board, the house came back. Stronger, smarter, built with a level of care that went beyond code or schedule. On the surface, it looked like another renovation completed by a master craftsman. Beneath that, something far heavier had settled into Tom. The work no one ever saw. After the fire, Tom Silva returned to television looking the same. Same calm voice, same steady movements, same measured explanations. But the way he approached every project had quietly changed. Speed stopped mattering altogether. What mattered was permanence. He began obsessing over details other builders ignored, where moisture would travel years from now, how heat would behave inside walls during extreme conditions, which joints would fail first when pressure came from the wrong direction. When most contractors relied on quick fixes, Tom slowed everything down, layering solutions that would never appear on screen but would quietly determine whether a house survived the next crisis. Some of those techniques spread quietly through New England. Carpenters began copying his layered cedar wedge method to correct uneven floors without stressing old frames. Others borrowed his discreet dehumidification approach to save warped hardwood instead of tearing it out. These weren't flashy innovations. They were invisible safeguards, and Tom preferred it that way. What viewers didn't realize was why he cared so deeply. Every improvement was measured against one question he never voiced out loud. Would this hold if fire came again? As the show took him across the country, Tom started seeing disaster on a scale far larger than anything he'd known. Burned neighborhoods in the West, where entire streets vanished overnight. Coastal homes twisted by storms. Old wiring in cold climates that failed without warning. Standing inside blackened frames, he recognized the same silence he'd felt years earlier in his brother's house, the same stunned families, the same question hanging in the air. Where do we even begin? Off camera, Tom began staying longer. He walked homeowners through fire-hardening techniques that never made it into episodes. He explained how embers slipped into roof lines, how cheap materials failed first, how preparation mattered more than aesthetics. And then he met families who couldn't rebuild at all. No insurance payout, no savings, no safety net. That was the turning point. Tom never announced a new mission. He didn't form an organization. He didn't speak about charity. He simply started helping, quietly, directly, sometimes with advice, sometimes with labor, sometimes with money that never showed up on any balance sheet. At the same time, another habit took on new meaning. Tom began restoring old tools, planes, saws, chisels, not as decoration, but as working instruments. He sold many of them privately, gave others to young carpenters who couldn't afford proper equipment. What looked like a personal hobby was, in reality, a quiet engine funding something far larger, a promise he had made to himself after standing in ash. The weight that never left his body. For years, viewers believed Tom Silva was untouched by time. His movements stayed precise. His voice never shook. He climbed ladders, lifted beams, and crawled through attics with the same quiet confidence he had always shown. What cameras didn't reveal was how much effort it took just to maintain that image. Decades of physical labor accumulate whether you acknowledge them or not. Years of lifting heavy lumber, twisting inside narrow framing cavities, working through cold winters and humid summers slowly took their toll. By the late 2000s, Tom's back began to fail in ways experience couldn't compensate for. He underwent major spinal surgeries that would have sidelined most people for a year or more. Recovery demanded rest, restraint, and patience. 3 things Tom had never been good at offering himself. He returned to work early. Too early, braces hidden under work shirts. Pain managed quietly, so no one else would have to adjust their schedule. Production didn't stop. Homeowners still depended on him, and Tom, true to form, absorbed the cost without complaint. The injuries didn't end there. Falls, sprains, and strains accumulated, each one dismissed as part of the job. He adjusted how he moved, how he lifted, how he climbed. But adapting only delayed the inevitable. In early 2025, a slip from a ladder fractured his hip, an injury that finally forced the truth into the open. Recovery would take months. Rest was no longer optional. Instead of disappearing, Tom did what he had always done. He turned the moment into instruction. He slowed down on camera. He explained safety checks. He acknowledged, briefly and without drama, that experience does not make anyone immune to a single mistake. What he didn't say was how close he had come to losing the ability to work at all. Behind the scenes, the toll was heavier than the injury itself. Every setback brought back an old fear, the fear of not being able to show up, for his family, for his crew, for the people whose homes depended on his hands. Each recovery pushed him to return faster than he should have, as if proving endurance mattered more than longevity. What he really lost, and why he never said a word. When the whispers finally surfaced in 2025, many people expected something dramatic, a financial collapse, a hidden controversy, some kind of revelation that would shatter the image Tom Silva had spent decades building. What emerged instead was something far quieter and far harder to process. Tom didn't lose his career. He didn't lose his reputation. What he lost were the things no camera ever followed him into. The savings that quietly disappeared into rebuilding efforts that never made the show. The nights of rest he traded for emergency repairs in towns most viewers would never hear about. The physical strength his body gave up piece by piece because he refused to stop showing up when others had nowhere else to turn. After the fire that destroyed his brother's home, Tom had made a private choice. If a family stood in the ruins of a house and had no way forward, he would help them find one. Not through public charity, not through press releases. Quietly, directly, sometimes through labor, sometimes through money, sometimes through tools restored and sold to fund another rebuild. That was the truth behind the rumors of a silent fund tied to the Silva name. It wasn't an organization. It wasn't branded. It existed only because Tom believed that knowing how to build carried a moral responsibility to act. While other television personalities expanded their profiles, Tom expanded his burden. He measured success not in exposure, but in whether a family slept under a solid roof again. Over time, that choice added up. Physically, the cost was visible. Surgeries, injuries, pain he learned to hide because slowing down felt like failure. Financially, it meant diverting resources most people would have protected for retirement. Emotionally, it meant carrying the weight of disasters he could never fully leave behind. Every burned frame reminded him of what fire steals. Every rebuilt wall felt like a small act of resistance against it. So when people said Tom Silva had lost it all, they misunderstood the phrase. He hadn't lost what mattered to television. He had given away what mattered to him. Today, Tom still appears when he can. He still teaches, still corrects mistakes gently, still believes that doing the job right matters more than doing it fast. At home, he lives the same grounded life he always has, surrounded by the history he spent decades preserving. His children grew up watching a father who valued character over comfort and integrity over recognition. Do you think Tom Silva made the right choice by giving so much of himself away, even when it cost him personally? Let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories you never heard this way before.